So I'm here to talk to you about full stack development. Calvin has already introduced me. Been doing this for a while now. I currently work with Microsoft, and I lead a huge team of full stack developers. And I wanted to talk to you guys about what full stack development is. Why is that a different opportunity from specific development? And what kind of career opportunities full stack development would offer you. Um, Please feel free to ask questions on the chat, or you can send your questions uh, to Calvin, or to Imarticus, and I should be happy to answer your questions. Um so let's start. All right, so let me just set the agenda. We'll cover 4 questions about full stack development. What is, some insights into what is a full stack development career? Why? So why do you need front end and back end skills? Uh, which are the top recruiting firms for full stack developers? What is the career path that you take as a full stack developer? What kind of salary benefits you'd get uh, out of a career in full stack development? And how is, we'll briefly touch upon how would you go about developing a career in full stack development. Um, so I'm assuming all of you guys are at various stages of your career. Some of you could be in web development. Some of you have not started on development. Some of you are actually looking at, moving from specific developer to a full stack developer. And this, hopefully, this webinar would be useful for all of you. Um, so moving on. Okay, let's go to the what, right? Let's cover a bit of history about development in general, and we'll then talk about full stack development. So how did we get to expecting know-it-alls? How did the industry get to expect their developers to do everything for them? We started pretty, I don't know how much experience all of you guys have, but we started pretty early. In back when I was, I just starting development and I was in college. You could create a web page in Word, Photoshop, or Fireworks, write a basic PHP backend in a SQL DB, or use a local state, FTP it to some server, and there you go. You had a small basic website. I created one for my college project, and that was full stack development, right? Creating a website was not as complicated because, well, the entire internet did not run the world back then. And then from there you move to Sun certified web component developer. I don't know how many of you have that certification or have heard of this certification, but those were the days of JSP and EJB. And we would regularly interleave server and client code. You would have ugly Java code inside JSP. And so most of it you'd see is, there was a single guy who would write all the code. And As we moved along, browsers became more and more powerful. Browsers started to have huge cache. Computers became more powerful, so we had a lot of memory. I remember when I started my career, we had 1 GB RAM on a server machine. Now we have 64 GB RAM. I have a 64 GB RAM desktop at home. So computers became more powerful, browsers became more powerful. We could do much more on the client side. Ajax came in with Orkut. You had the ability to send a message, and only that part of the message would get updated. So Ajax came in, and we needed some way of separating, concerns around. Uh, is there a question? Uh, no. Okay. So we needed, some way of separating concerns around the client side and the server side. And the client side became more powerful, right? So we had JavaScript frameworks, and suddenly you see all these JavaScript frameworks, Angular, React, and CSS frameworks, Bootstrap, and all of these coming into the picture. Web systems started designing for scale. And we moved to stateless services from the stateful world of writing JSPs to moving to stateful services. separation of concerns became a huge thing, right? So earlier when you do coding, or if you look at any good architecture book from 10 years back, it would speak of a multi-tiered architecture, or an n-tiered or an m-tiered architecture, and that was basically separating concerns between client server, middleware, etc. So that became a real thing because we were writing bigger and bigger code, and you needed specialized programmers for doing that, right? So that's when that's when the world became about developers, and about backend developers, and about middleware developers, and so on. But now we are sort of congregating towards, not to the old days, but towards a developer who can do all three things. uh, uh, a lot of companies, for example Microsoft, or Amazon, or even Google, used to hire SDETs 10 years back, which were software development engineers in test. They don't hire SDETs anymore because a lot of test is done through automation, right? So automation has brought about, for your continuous build or continuous deployment, you don't need a huge DevOps team because you have managed services, right? So all these big fives, especially, they rely heavily on managed services. The cost of maintaining DevOps is very high. So because of all that, a developer is expected to be fungible, right? Big companies run multiple projects, and some of them would be front end heavy, some of them would be back end heavy. They cannot afford to hire specific developers for each project because you have people move from project to project. So what they need is fungibility. And for fungibility, and to be fungible and to be useful, to a big company, you have to know all the stacks, right? And that's how the entire term, or the need for full stack developer came in. And that's why, if you look at especially the big five, if you look at them, they hire only full stack guys. If they're hiring lateral people, if they hire from colleges, they develop the engineers into full stack engineers, right? So it's really important to know the entire stack. And we'll talk about why is it important, right? And let's first discuss what are the essential technologies that sort of make a full stack engineer. Um, so you have your usual you have your front end is node also serves as your backend with Express, um, npm, js, TypeScript, less and CSS for your script, for your styling. HTML, with HTML5 you get a lot of capabilities out of the box. Angular, React framework. React is a really powerful framework. It can help you write mobile code as well with React Native, and sort of has revolutionized the way web components are getting written across the world, right? So that's a really important. Both Angular and React are really important to have in your kitty. Then there's a lot of server-side code. People write Java, and the associated Java stacks. You have Spring MVC, and Spring has like 1,000 libraries. Then you have .NET and NuGet. You have Maven and packaging, and then you have all the server-side design patterns, right? I mean, if we sit and discuss the server-side design patterns, that themselves would sort of probably be a 2 hour talk. Uh, the another essential skill is developing some sort of DevOps skill, which means you should be able to deal with servers, Nginx, Tomcat. You should be able to deal with load balancers. You should know a little bit of shell scripting, a little bit of understanding of how the operating system works, how to schedule cron jobs, and how to work with cron jobs, etc. Apart from that, you have cloud. So you would be expected to work a little bit on Azure or AWS, Google Apps, Google Cloud Platform, WordPress. There are a lot of sites which are developed and written on WordPress. So WordPress is also, it's sort of though not for really complicated websites, but WordPress does solve a lot of real world problems. Tooling, project management tooling, Azure DevOps, Jira, MS Project, depending on where you are, Trello, etc. of course, there's GitHub, and you need to know Git or some sort of an SVN system. CVS and SVN were used, but almost everyone these days uses Git. So Git is something that you should really know is really important, and it's also like a de facto. You'd be expected to know that. So tooling is really important. There's a plethora of tools. Um a great way to sort of understand and know tooling is to read up as much as possible and use as many tools as you want, or as you possibly can while working on certain project. You have database. Again, database. There's been an explosion of NoSQL databases in the last 10 years. There's a great book on NoSQL databases called NoSQL Distilled. I'd recommend you guys read that book. And then you have your SQL DBs, right? And then they have managed and unmanaged SQL DBs. So you have Azure SQL, for example, or you have um, or you can have MySQL, right? So whether you want to manage them or you want to use a managed service, it's a decision you want to make. MongoDB, Elasticsearch, Cassandra, DynamoDB, Cosmos DB, and I haven't even covered like 2%, right? But these are the usual names that you hear while writing NoSQL. And these are the essential technologies, right? These are some of the essentials that a NoSQL developer would know. But is there more? There always is. I think that's the motto of a full stack developer, right? A full stack developer has to keep on learning. There's always more to learn, right? If you go to the Apache web page, they're probably running around 70 to 80 active projects right now, and all of them are doing different things, right? So there's always the need and the want to know more. You should always be hungry to learn more if you want to be a successful full stack developer. I have people in my team who come and tell me, "Hey, I want to use Bloom filter in one of my code, and I want to figure out how to use one." Uh, and that's the attitude you need to have if you want to be successful as a full stack developer. So besides these essentials, you might also be expected to know mobile development, depending on the kind of firm that you work for or are you interviewing with. And mobile, again, this hybrid and native. You have React Native. It's a sort of hybrid, but not really native. But it translates into native code. You have Android, iOS, tvOS, Android TV, Android Auto. Again, a plethora of technologies, but the base is always Android, and Objective C for writing code on iOS, and Java for writing code on Android. And then you have React Native and various other hybrid frameworks. Though I don't think a lot of companies would expect you to know hybrid frameworks. You have test automation that it's good to have Jasmine, Appium, Rocketium, Selenium. Again, thousands of other tools that you'd have for test automation. Machine learning is something that's heating up. It's becoming an essential as we go on and move on. Deep learning, recommendation algos, ranking, relevance. A lot of problems are getting solved with machine learning. I'd recommend someone who wants to be any kind of developer to develop some interest in machine learning and at least learn about few deterministic algorithms, if not everything. You might be expected to know design. You might be expected to at least understand design if you are a full stack developer. So these are not necessities, but it's good to have, right? It's good to, for example, if you're working for a startup, you might be expected to design yourself. Some of the tools you can use is Sketch, Zeppelin, Canva, Balsamiq, Apollo, etc. You might be expected to do project management in your role, right? Um, the point I'm trying to make here is there's almost no limit to being a full stack developer, right? You will have to define that limit. And also, see, another point I'm trying to make is um always make sure that you're really good at one thing. And so when you're a full stack developer, don't try and be a jack of all trades. It'll never work. Make sure you're really good at one thing. Make sure you get your fundamentals right. Make sure you know how a browser works, for example. Make sure you know how Java works internally, how a JVM works. If you're getting writing code in Android, you should know how the Dalvik VM works, and so on and so forth, right? So get your fundamentals right. Make sure you're good at least one thing, and then you will eventually become really good at other things when if you're a full stack guy. Um, so let me just do a quick time check. Calvin, how are we doing on time?
I'm sorry, Shubham, I didn't hear you. What was that?
Never mind. I just want to do a quick time check. All right. So we are 18 minutes down. I just wanted to focus on the why to make sure I've covered some of the essential technologies, right? Which is what does a full stack developer constitute? Now let's figure out why should you become a full stack developer, and it's an incremental advantage as you become a full stack developer, and as you go along, you will know and feel that you're becoming better. You're gaining one advantage of the other, right? So at the bottom most of the stack is more stacks, right? So you reuse patterns from one stack into other stack. I'll cover a little bit of case study when I'll do some case studies when I talk about them in the next slide. But what reuse does is, let's say you encounter a pattern while working on a browser, right, where you have to cache the least recently used entries, right? You can reuse the same pattern on your server side, right? Or for example, an event engine on the JavaScript. Uh, Node introduced event engine, not event engine. Node introduced event loops, and those event loops were then, Java introduced framework, or people wrote framework in Java to introduce event loops, right? It was the vector framework, right? So if you know more stacks, you will be able to reuse patterns from one stack into another, and you will be able to better understand challenges of people who are working on another stack. It'll make you more a better developer, more empathetic developer, um, and will improve your relationships in a team if you're working on a team, right? And I'm not even exaggerating the role that this plays. You'll have more career options, right? If you're bored of making apps, you can immediately switch. And if you're working in big companies, the advantage is you can switch projects, right? And any big company is working on hundreds of projects. You can immediately switch projects. If you're bored of making apps, you can switch to designing a stream processing system, which is pure backend big data role, right? So being fungible gives you that freedom. I've seen people fail in big organizations, in a Google, in a Microsoft, people who create app developers in their respective companies, and they joined a Google or a Microsoft, and they were put on the back end, and they failed miserably, and they had to leave those companies. So um, being a full stack developer uh, gives you the ability to not get bored, right? You can, I mean, any job um, uh, uh, would lead, if you do something for a very long time, you can develop a tendency to get bored. um, Being a full stack developer allows you the choice to pick up new stuff and learn new stuff, which brings me to my next point: learn new stuff. Being a full stack developer becomes a forcing function to develop a growth mindset. uh, I'll speak a little bit about growth mindset because that's really important to being a full stack developer, right? What is growth mindset? Growth mindset is basically, if you get some feedback, you do not take it negatively, and you build on that feedback and take a stride, and you make good of that feedback and grow, right? So when you come across something that you do not know, you learn that thing and grow. That's growth mindset. People with great growth mindsets are people who are generally successful in life, and being a full stack developer actually subconsciously gets you uh, into learning and into being serious about your growth, because it's a forcing function, right? If you're a full stack developer, Java is a technology, with every new release is changing. You have new frameworks dropping in every now and then. uh, Microsoft Azure is releasing new stuff, and AWS is releasing new stuff every second month. And you have new programming paradigms coming in, right? So I mean, we didn't have functional programming in Java before Scala, and as soon as Scala was introduced, Java introduced functional programming in Java 8. Um, so there's a lot of you will have to develop, a growth mindset to become a good full stack developer. It allows you to cast a wide net, obviously. So when you talk about jobs and you talk about job opportunities, being a full stack developer will always obviously allow you to cast a really wide net. You become available for more job opportunities, have a better chance of getting hired at the big five, because as I said, they're looking for fungible people. They're looking for people uh, that that can pick up a new language, that can pick up a new role without being afraid of it. And I think a large part of it is your inability to take up something new. And as humans, it's difficult for us to when we are working in a sort of a cocooned environment, it's difficult for us to pick up something new and challenge ourselves, right? But big companies look for that. They want that. They want people who can challenge themselves continuously and pick up something new and run with it, because they have thousands of problems to solve and they don't have great people to solve those problems. So when you become a full stack developer, when you challenge yourself to learn new things across a plethora of streams, uh, you've developed that habit of picking up a new language in 3 days. You develop that habit of learning a new technology in a week, and that's the kind of mindset that any company is looking for, right? And not just as a developer, right? When you grow, and I'll talk about career paths later on, but when you grow, right, in your career, you will have situations where you will need to exhibit growth mindset, right? For example, let's say you move from a product manager to a VP. A VP's KPIs are very different. A VP would expect it to also know business, but a product manager wouldn't, expect it to, for example, know how to read a balance sheet. But if you have growth mindset, if you've done this in the past, not being afraid of learning new things, if you've done that in the past, you would dive into that situation, relish that situation, as opposed to being cocooned in a safe environment of what you already know. So it is important, right, to have that mindset, and it'll give you the ability to cast a wide net. Grow in your career, right? If you've already landed a great job, developing this growth mindset and using patterns makes you better at your job. It'll allow you to grow faster. I'll obviously pick a leader if I had to in my team who has growth mindset, then someone who likes to work in the way that he or she likes to work, right? So without a doubt, some developing some skill like that helps you grow in your career, and at the end of the day, you earn more, right? And so if you develop all these things, right, if you understand, as a full stack developer, it's simple maths. You're getting paid for doing three people's job, and because you're the single guy who's working on a singular mission, uh, those three people do not, the time that is wasted in context switching between these three people, it's not wasted with a full stack developer. He knows what the back end is, he knows what the front end is, he knows how to integrate the back end and the front end while writing code and doing design. um, so obviously you get paid more, you bring a lot to the table, you increase the efficiency of output for the company, you take on a lot more ownership in whatever role you're working at, and that's why you get paid more. So these are incremental advantages of thinking about a career in full stack development, right? And let me just talk through some examples that I cooked up. And I've seen in some of these are hypothetical, some of them are something that I've seen in the past. So one example was, you develop empathy, as I said, which is better understand external systems. Let's say you're working on creating a UI that docks to a source REST-based API developed by a partner team, and you want the API to be delivered within certain parameters, and the partner team cannot deliver it because of the way their DB is structured, right? Now, if you were writing just the UI, you'd get frustrated sitting, why is the partner team not delivering it, right? But if you're a full stack guy, you'd you can get into a deeper discussion with them about their problems, understand their problems a lot better, and probably recommend solutions that will work for both of you. So that's when I talked about full stack development will help you better understand external systems, develop good relationships, and sort of power through problems. If you get into a full-time developmental career, you would know that you will have a lot of problems as you move along, right? So a full stack development would help you power through those problems. Create better client server interaction models. You're creating a REST API that sends out regular updates to feed. However, those updates do not change within a day. Being a full stack developer, you know that a client can cache those within the browser, and hence you send cache expiry headers along with your API response. Uh, um, and these are modern day or modern browser uh, improvements that a backend developer needs to be aware of, right? So if you're an API developer, you need to be aware of how browser interprets. So writing API for a browser-based system is very different to writing API from service-to-service communication, because you need to be really aware of how your headers are working. And for that, you need to understand a little bit of how a browser works and how client-side code works, so that you can write better code, right? So you're not totally limited. The separation of concerns is not that high that you don't have to worry about what the client is doing. You can run your own startup, right? Since you know the complete stack, you can leverage the knowledge to spawn your own cluster in AWS, write a Lambda, write some front end code, and get started on a website that you always wanted to put up, right? I mean, you have an idea, you wanted to put up a website, don't look around for a partner who can write some front end code. You can write your own front end, write a back end, run that website up. And I remember I wrote a small website, I think a few years back, that used to capture data from Flipkart and Amazon and all of these guys and put up like a billboard. It didn't work out, but I had fun doing it. So you can do some of those projects as well, and it was a lot of fun. You get to learn a lot out of those projects, uh, and who knows, maybe it works and you land up on something great, and you grow, right? So your manager needs to pick someone to lead and architect a complicated project that involves knowledge of both source and sync systems, as well as an ability to lead a team. um, if you're one of the few full stack developers, picking you would be a more obvious choice, right? Let's say working on the backend team, and he needs someone he wants someone to lead the front end team as well. If you're a full stack guy, he would definitely pick you because he knows that it will be easy for you to lead the front end team as well. So these are some of the examples that I feel that, and or case studies where being a full stack developer would put you on an advantage. And it's very simple, right? I mean, the more you know, the more you learn, the better positioned you are anyway, right? So let's move on to the next slide. Right. So which, um, um, so let's talk a little bit about salary data, right? And um, what kind of salaries do we expect on a full stack developer? I'm sure you guys must have done your own research to sort of find out what kind of salaries to expect. But I just grabbed this data from Indeed, right? So if you look at the average salary in India of a full stack developer, it is around 6.5 lakhs for a full stack developer per year, which translates to around 60,000, 60,000 per month. Whereas for for a web developer, it is around 16,000. For a backend developer, it is around 17,000. Obviously, these salaries are at the lower end of the spectrum, right? Let's say on an average, a full stack developer at so if you think of the big five, right, they only hire full stack developers. They don't hire specialized developers, right? And the average salary at any big five would be around 20-25 lakhs for an experience of around 6-7 years, minimum 20-25 lakhs per year. Um, And so you can understand, the kind of difference it will make to your profile and to your resume if you know full stack development. So let's move on. We've discussed salary. There's some salary trends as well, right? As I'd spoken, a full stack developer would, around the experience of 8+ years, can, and this is data from cutshort.io, can earn around 26 LPA. This is an average salary, guys. So understand that on the top end, you can make much more. If you include stocks, you can earn around 40 to 50 lakhs if you're around 8 to 10 years of experience. And so the better you are at your job. And I think earlier the focus was on your pedigree and college and all of that, but I think once you gain some experience, once you're really good at your job, uh, being a full stack developer is very, very rewarding. um, uh, and can lead to, and it does not mean that you have to start out as a full stack developer, right? You can start out as a web developer and still become a full stack. You can start out as a backend. I started out as a backend developer and became a full stack developer along my career. And I started out developing websites by sitting at home on weekends and writing website front end code. I never wrote front end code as a part of my job early on. So you can well understand that you and the idea is to be able to uh, code on the front end without, or on the back end, uh, without being afraid of picking something new. I think that's the essential takeaway from that, and you'll have this trajectory in your career path as well. So let's discuss some career paths. Of, this is usually like, if you can go to this website called levels.fii, it'll tell you career paths across big five companies. But this is, a generic career path of, let's say, an Amazon, Google, or a Microsoft, or any other big company. You start out as a developer. If you're out from college, you start out as a developer. You become a senior dev within a few years, and then you some companies call it architects, CMs, or whatever, principals or directors. So some companies call them directors, some companies call them principals. Anyway, so what you do is you become a senior dev, then you become an EM. If you want to go to the managerial role, if you want to go into the architect role, you would become an architect, right? This is a technical role. You can move across levels, you can move within the same level also. PM is product manager, TPM is program manager, and PMT is program manager technical. Various companies have various names for this role, but largely a program manager is someone who manages programs, which basically means that, let's say, a WhatsApp app would have multiple programs, right? A client app, uh, the app itself is one program. The backend server that supports the app is another program, and you'll have a program manager who tracks the timelines of whatever the teams are doing in that program and reporting the success or failure of that program. The engineering manager would maintain an engineering team, who would lead an engineering team. He's expected to be a lot more technical than a PMT or a PM. A PM also defines, what goes into the product. I'm sure you guys are aware. Um, an engineering manager, however, is a pure technical role, right? He would run the sprints, the Scrum process. And not sure if you guys are aware of the Scrum process. If not, you should read up on it. That's another essential, um, the Agile process. So he would run the Agile process, lead one team or multiple teams, depending on where he is. And you have an architect whose responsibility is to create, scalable architectures. That's an IC role. An engineering manager would have people management responsibilities. But understand that as you move from here to here or here to here, in these areas, an architect and EM, this is when you would be expected to go full stack, right? And it's not a compulsory expectation, but in most cases, or then often, you would have some amount of full stack expectations, because an EM might lead both a UI team as well as a backend team. An architect might be expected to write architecture for both the front end and the back end, right? So you would start, seeing your managers or bosses expecting full stack roles from you here. If you're not full stack, right, then you might see yourself getting stuck here pretty often. Or if you want to move away from technology, you take up these roles, but then you have to develop knowledge of business and product and read up a lot to be successful here, right? Director of product management. But there's some amount of business knowledge people usually do to move from here to here. People would do an MBA here, but these would be a full stack role, right? And then you grow, if you grow in an architect role, you become a senior architect who would have multiple architects sort of reporting into him, or if not anyone's reporting into him, you tried architecture for multiple projects, right? And a distinguished engineer is like a VP who's sort of taking a vertical and is like the CTO of that vertical for a big company. And then you become an executive, which is like a CEO or CEO of a vertical, etc. Um, how and when you become an executive is totally dependent on what you're able to achieve and how you achieve that and your career path and career growth, and it's something that every company defines differently. I wouldn't really talk about it. It doesn't make sense for me to talk about it now, but what I can really talk about is um, how do you reach here, and especially this area, these four roles: architect, EM, director, senior architect. These are the four roles. I think when you move from EM to a director, you're expected to handle multiple projects and not just one, and then uh, uh, do a great amount of people management. It is a 50-60 role, that is 50 into people and 50 into tech. You're still expected to be an architect even if you're a director, right? And if you're a senior architect, um, your entire focus is on technology. So writing complicated architectures, having complicated discussions, develop a lot of, and understand, guys, as I talked about relationships earlier. um, all of when you move to these roles, right, your relationships will be able to move you, right? So the more people you know, the more people you've worked in an organization, the more people who can vouch for you, the faster you grow. So it is important that people vouch for you. And how do you make sure that people vouch for you when you work with a partner team? How do you make sure that the partner team has rave reviews for your team and for you in particular? Is by making sure you're solving their problems and not just your own problems. How do you solve their problems? Solve their problems through empathy. You understand their problems. This is the first step to solving anyone's problems, is to understand their problems. And so that's why it is important that you just one second. So I'm sorry, someone came into the room. So yeah, you make sure that you solve not only your own problems but the problems of your partner teams. And the more you know, the better you understand other people's architectures, the easier it is for you to solve other people's problems. Okay, let's move on. Which are the top firms that hire? As I said, the top five: Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Amazon. There's Netflix as well, but they don't have an engineering team in India. There's Uber, there's Adobe. These are top firms, top paying firms, that hire full stack guys only. Uber might have positions which hire, just app developers or just backend developers. But the others of the top five would hire full stack guys only. If you're a full stack person, it's very very easy. Like Adobe calls them computer scientists. Amazon would call them SDEs. I think everyone else pretty much calls them SDEs. Um, you have your top startups. I've worked for some of them. You have your Ola, Swiggy, Flipkart, Grofers, Hotstar, Dream11, etc. Dream11 just became a unicorn. And I've seen some of their architectures. It's pretty complicated, and they've done some really good work, right? All of these top startups, and it is important. I mean, you might enter into an Ola as an app developer, but if you want to grow in an Ola, you have to become full stack. For all the reasons that I've discussed earlier. Swiggy, for example, Swiggy is, if you look at the problem space itself, it's very complicated. That's more complicated than some of the problems that Google has solved. It's you need to ensure delivery within a certain time frame, and you need to be able to track that delivery. Flipkart has solved a lot of difficult problems, especially in big data, because to be able to and especially around Big Billion, right? When you had flash sale and all of that. Flash sale is a difficult tech problem to solve. I think you should. So all of these companies have solved really difficult tech problems, and they've done through hiring great engineers and developing great engineers. So you have a huge talent pool, and there are others: Visa, Viacom, Goldman, Morgan Stanley, and others. But understand that all of these companies have crazy huge talent pool and really talented people, and if you need to shine through, you need to understand that you will need uh, to know every technology, right, on both sides of the spectrum. You might not consistently use all these technologies as a developer, right? So if you're working on a certain project, it'll either be a back-end or a front-end project, but you'll be expected to move from a back-end to a front-end project, or from a front-end to back-end project in either of these companies, right? And when you grow, we talked about the growth path and the career paths earlier, and when you grow, uh, you will have situations where um, you want to lead a team, or if it's also about your ability to build trust with an organization, right? If there's a new project, it's easier for your bosses to give you that new project if they know that you understand the complexities end to end, instead of just understanding one part of the complexity. um, and I'm sure one of these firms is your sort of dream company to get into. I know Microsoft was mine when I was in college. So make sure you develop those abilities that these companies are proud to have you, right? And Yeah, that's all I had for this slide. So how, right? Let's talk a bit about how do you go about becoming a full stack developer. I wanted to spend some time on this. And so, there are two things. I'll talk about technologies first, and then I'll talk about attitude and growth mindset that I've already spoken about a little bit. But so if you look at the peripheral areas, right, you have front end and back end development, right? So you start with front end fundamentals. You develop your basic fundamental JavaScript skills. Understanding the DOM structure, how there are various DOM parsers that you might want to use. Developing basic HTML skills. That's how you get started on the front end. CSS skills, how to tie down CSS and HTML and JavaScript is something that you'd want to learn. Um, that's the sentinel of, or the peripheral of what you want to do on the front end, right? And then there's backend. Backend, you want to do pick up one language. Java is probably the most popular language used across the world, and also learn to use a Java framework, right? So you have Spring Boot, Spring MVC, um, and all of these frameworks help you scale Java as a language. But when you learn Java, there's a book on Java called Essentials. Um, uh, uh, Effective Java, sorry, not Essentials. And that book talks about the fundamentals of Java language. How does the Java compiler work? What is code swapping? Um, how does serialization work within Java? How does threading work within Java? And all of those things. Understand the fundamentals of the Java language, or any language that you pick up, right? See, the fundamentals of most languages are the same, and that's why I'm focusing so much on understanding fundamentals. If you understand how data types work, and how paging is done and stuff like that, it'll be much easier for you to pick up any other language, right? So Learning fundamentals of Java means learning a little bit about compilers and operating systems as well. But make sure you learn to use the language and then learn to use it effectively. And then you move on and graduate to learning a framework such as Spring. You had Struts and Hibernate as well, uh, but did not use as much as Spring now. So because Spring JDBC and Hibernate's ORMs have sort of become an anti-pattern gradually. Some people might disagree, but uh, so you have so you do that, right? You start with that, and then you go deeper on both sides. So you develop an authoring framework such as Bootstrap, or a CSS framework, and JavaScript frameworks such as Angular or maybe React, and make a interactive UI. So till now you were developing flat UIs. Now you're learning to make AJAX calls and learning to make bind data with bind data with your UI components. And frameworks like Angular would help you do that. It's Angular would Angular is not just JavaScript framework; it'll also help you do data bindings, and not just make pretty pages. Um, and then on the backend side, you get familiar with SQL DB and NoSQL DB, and start interaction with your programs, right? And this is very, I can we can do a 1 hour talk on just seeing NoSQL DBs, right? There are thousands of NoSQL DBs, some which are optimized for um, uh, uh, time bound systems, some which are optimized for searching, some which are optimized for document oriented systems, some which are optimized for key values, some which are optimized to run in cache, some which are optimized to run on disk, some which are optimized to do reads more than writes. There are other which are optimized for writing more than reading and all of that. Some which are optimized for atomicity, as well, some which are optimized for consistency, and uh, some which are optimized for partitioning, right? So you learn about the CAP theorem. So you have a plethora of databases available to you. Get familiar with some of them. I think Mongo is a good start because it tries to be everything. It will get open the world of search geohash databases, as well as document oriented databases and indexes on NoSQL DB to you. SQL, pick up any SQL technology and learn through that, and then tie down these two, right? So tie down JavaScript HTML skills with authoring and Angular skills, and tie down writing, learning to write code in Java and Spring, and use Spring JDBC, or use Spring to talk to Spring Mongo to talk to your MongoDB. When you tie down these two, the third most important thing is to tie everything together. So you've developed a website, an interactive website, you've developed a backend, and you've developed some REST APIs. All you need to do is now do data binding on the front end and with the backend. So now you have some code running on your local machine, which is both front end and back end. And then you get into the complexities of other stuff. How do you make this code? This is what we call operational excellence, right? So how do you make this code run? How do you make this code scale? That's what a DevOps team does, right? So you tie everything down, deploy your solution, or run your builds and take the build artifact, go and deploy on it on some AWS machine. So that's what I wanted to talk about next. So to develop the skills that I just talked about, right? Pick up a course which gives you this plethora of front end, back end information type, captured into your sort of densely packed into a single course. And since I'm here for Imarticus, I wanted to speak about the course that they have, right, on front end and back end skills. I've seen the course content. It is almost what I'd want any full stack developer in my team to learn. It introduces into you do multiple full stacks. So you'll get to learn mean. Mean is Mongo, Express, Angular, and Node. Uh, and then you have, which is called the stack. So it's one of the first full stacks. And then you have Java and Angular full stack. So you can write your Java services. Mean basically uses Node and Express as a backend. And Java, you can use Java and Spring, and Tomcat is another backend. There are multiple full stacks. LAMP is one. LAMP was the archaic one that we talked about earlier. So on PHP, I would not recommend you to sort of spend time learning LAMP. Um, but yeah, Java and Angular is another stack that this course would introduce you to. And it will, so you will reach here on doing that course, and that's 80% of the work done. You have a running website, you have your dream website that you wanted to create, and that's done. That's sitting on your laptop. And what do you want to do next post that course is start reading case studies. Read about WhatsApp, for example. How did they develop WhatsApp? What was the architecture behind it? What was the front and back end? Why did they choose Erlang as a language, and all of that, right? Read that on the side. Read about how Uber, for example, solves its big data problem. How does it use machine learning to make data driven decisions around search pricing, etc. Read about all of that. That will open your mind up around being a great developer. Get a free account on the cloud platform. I know Microsoft gives you around $300 worth free access to Azure. AWS also gives you somewhere around that. Deploy what you just wrote, right? You wrote a website, deploy that, work around with automated scaling and virtual machines, and how do you run code on a virtual machine. How do you start cron jobs to do automated cleanups. How do you do logging and telemetry. So App Insights is a great thing to use for logging telemetry. You can use Elasticsearch and Logstash for, and all of those technologies, right? Understand that. So once you have code ready, you will start seeing these problems. You'll start seeing these problems. Hey, how do I measure what I've just written? How do I measure how many people have accessed my website? How do I do a Google Analytics integration? All of that, right? And I think the entire purpose of the full stack development certification course is to get you to ask those questions. Ask these tough questions to yourself, and you'll automatically move towards gravitate. You will see a need for a technology, and you'll go to AWS and find that technology, or you'll go to Apache and you'll find that technology, right? Learn about continuous development and deployment. VSO, for example, supports a build pipeline. You can use that. Find a mentor if you can, within your work, outside of your work. If you're not working, find write to people that you admire in the industry. Go to GitHub pages, look at open source. Write to sort of people who worked on that open source and learn about open source. Try and contribute to open source. That's a great thing to have. And read more. Keep on reading. I think that's the most important thing. I think so. I would say get a certification course, or find someone who can teach you these skills in a cramped. This will accelerate your growth. I'm not saying that it's necessary to do a course. You can learn it by yourself, but it'll take you probably 1.5 years to do that. If you have a course, if you have a teaching system built around it, it'll accelerate your movement towards a full stack development. And I think another thing that I spoke about finding a mentor. So when you get into a certification course, you have a student community around it. You get to interact with that community and you learn from them. You have a teacher community, or not teacher community. At least you'll have a teacher or a mentor. When you get to that course, and they'll help you find the right skills, or the right areas to work at. And of course, contributing to open source, there's nothing like it that will augment. But I think set the base correctly, learn your front and back end stacks, get code running on your laptop or machine, and then learn to deploy that code and scale. That's the only advice I could give you to become a great full stack developer, and have a great career in developing some really kick-ass piece of software that all these big companies are developing.